Good afternoon, folks. JB here with you live on WFLA Now, launching live on our website, on our app, as well as on YouTube Live. We're going to, of course, let our YouTube audience file in here for coverage of the story of the day from Washington, D.C., the arraignment of the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. We have this first live feed up, and it's a live feed from the airport where Trump is expected to be landing here momentarily. He took off from his estate in New Jersey, and you're going to see here the camera is going to be scanning the skies for the Trump plane. Trump will deplane. He will be getting into his motorcade. He'll be taken over to the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. to be arraigned on 4 charges in relation to the allegation of overturning the results or seeking to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. Looking here, this plane clearly not the Trump plane. That one has United Airlines on it. So this is a raw feed that we're tapping into here live in the Stream Center. And we have full interactive coverage with our entire team coming up here in the next several minutes on WFLA Now. So I'll be back. I'll be monitoring this shot. But again, you're looking here live from Washington, D.C. as we await the arrival of Donald Trump for his arraignment at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. Again, coming up here in just a little bit. We have now gained access to this new feed showing the Trump plane as it prepares for landing. It has begun to make its initial descent, as we understand it, and will be on the ground here momentarily. You can see the Trump logo on the plane that is getting closer to the airport in Washington, D.C., again ahead of his arraignment, scheduled at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. Full coverage coming your way in just a few minutes on WFLA Now. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, folks. JB here with you live across several platforms on WFLA Now. The plane of the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, landing here in Washington, D.C., ahead of his arraignment at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. Full coverage coming up here live on WFLA Now. This is, again, a live feed from Washington, D.C. Trump is expected to, by motorcade, be transported to the federal courthouse for his arraignment. Again, at 4 o'clock Eastern. Stand by for live coverage. Good afternoon, folks. JB here with you live on WFLA Now. Donald J. Trump has officially landed in Washington, D.C. You can see his motorcade pulling up on the runway at the airport to transport him to the federal courthouse where he's going to be arraigned at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. The arraignment is to be preceded by being processed by law enforcement, being taken into custody, and then it's actually in the courtroom where he will face a judge, and he's expected to enter a plea of not guilty before being released so that he can continue on, of course, campaigning for president of the United States in 2024. So here we have the press vehicle. Here's actually an interesting shot. We'll go full screen here, and you can take a look. This is an interesting shot from inside the press vehicle, showing you a little bit of what uh, journalists and photographers go through as far as covering the arrival of a president or former president. It's, of course, an extremely secure process, and they are part of the motorcade that will be taking Donald Trump to the federal courthouse in the minutes ahead. So now you can see all the members of the press. They're getting out of the van. They're going to be encouraged to go. Or nope. All right. So so there you can see a press liaison who told them to stand back because they hadn't been given the opportunity to set up a pre-assigned area for the press to gather. So now they're saying, okay, we don't have audio, by the way. I would bring up audio full, but there's no audio coming through on this feed. I don't believe their microphone is connected or turned on at the moment. And I think that's why we're seeing a couple of these feeds bounce back and forth. This is a helicopter shot, a helicopter that is staying out of airport airspace, of course, not interfering with any of the landing, the departures of various planes here at the airport. And so we'll go back to that ground shot when we can. They're getting set up to show you Donald J. Trump get off of his plane, of course, and then be taken by motorcade to the courthouse where he's expected to arrive early because he will have to be processed by law enforcement, very similar to the other two arraignments that have occurred in just this year, one in New York, one here in the state of Florida. But this one is pertaining specifically to charges alleging that he sought to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election, and of course his role in the January 6th insurrection, the riots that took place at the Capitol, in our nation's capital, which of course is now etched into our brains, the sight of people storming into the Capitol building with signs. Going through the hallways of the Capitol building. It, of course, was a massive security breakdown with just the volume of people that stormed into the Capitol building that day, in a moment a day that will live on in American history, a moment that, of course, we saw play out live as we were covering that, actually live on stream more than 3 years ago. But we're here today to cover the arraignment of Donald Trump. There will not be a live feed inside the federal courthouse, but we'll be able to show you, we believe, Trump arriving at the courthouse, and then, of course, his departure from the courthouse as well. We're also going to have expert analysis coverage here with Masa Saidi, our WFLA investigator, who has covered Donald Trump, also continues to cover Governor Ron DeSantis and his campaign for president on the Republican ticket. We'll also be hearing from Libby Dean, who does the same, covering Ron DeSantis and covering Florida politics from our Tallahassee Capitol Bureau up in the Florida State Capitol. So welcoming in folks joining us on the WFLA YouTube page. I'm seeing a lot of commenters, including Jamie, Steve, Mike, Jules, several others, saying hello to Lynn, one of our great moderators on the WFLA YouTube page. And we also have a poll asking, do you think Trump sought to overturn the results of the 2020 election? And we'll get to those results as they continue to pour on in. But in the meantime, we'll go full screen here and again continue to show you the plane and hope to have a restored live feed from on the ground to capture Donald Trump as he Plains gets into his motorcade where he'll be taken to the federal courthouse again for the 4 o'clock arraignment. The arraignment will begin in about an hour from now. And here we have Donald J. Trump, 45th President of the United States, coming down the stairs from his plane that has just recently landed in Washington, D.C. He waves at the cameras, and as he sets foot back in Washington, D.C. again officially with his feet on the ground, he gets into his motorcade. He will be transported to the federal courthouse for his arraignment on 4 charges. And you can hear there the press liaison who is encouraging the press now to get back into their press vehicle as part of the motorcade. So they're now getting rushed back into the car where they are now part of this long line of black SUVs that'll be making their way with police escort through Washington, D.C. To the federal courthouse. You can see other members of Trump's team getting off of the plane. We'll see if we spot anybody that we recognize, any members of the Trump family or any members of the Trump legal team. The indictment coming down Tuesday from Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith. And that indictment included 4 felony charges, all pertaining to Donald Trump's efforts to undo the presidential election in the run-up to January 6th, 2021, of course, the insurrection at the Capitol. The allegations including the conspiracy to defraud the United States government and conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. It's worth noting here, folks, that these charges do carry the possibility of a years-long prison sentence should they lead to a conviction. This is one of several legal situations that are currently unfolding for the 45th president of the United States, and it's unfolding at the same time of his, of course, attempts to reclaim office, the highest office in our land, the office of the president of the United States. But again, he has charges related to the Stormy Daniels case in New York. He has charges related to the allegations of hoarding classified documents at Mar-a-Lago down here in Florida. And then he has now the federal charges that he's answering to in Washington, D.C. There's also another case that could be unfolding in the months ahead as prosecutors in Fulton County, Georgia, they're expected in the next several weeks to announce charges or decisions in relation to their investigation into efforts to subvert election results in that state as well. So the potential for 3 or more ongoing trials, legal uncertainty surrounding Donald Trump as his election continues to gain momentum, his campaign continues to gain momentum with just a little over a year before the 2024 presidential election. Here we're looking at the motorcade now departing the airport. You can see that they are being led by a police escort. Trump is in obviously one of those first few SUVs, those black SUVs. Other members of his team are in those SUVs, as well as the press unit that we had a camera feed from earlier. I don't think that we No, I don't believe that we now have a camera feed from inside the motorcade. We might regain access to that feed at some point in the future, but we don't have it at the moment. So again, we'll continue to monitor this full screen. Oh, there we have it. So now we're looking inside the motorcade in one of the. This is a vehicle at the back half of the motorcade for sure, as they leave the airport. Trump, while we were talking a little bit earlier about how Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith has been the one to file the indictment. On the other side of this, uh, Trump will be represented by John Lauro, who has been publicly defending Trump in television interviews and saying that Trump is protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution, the First Amendment, the right to free speech, and that Trump continues to just follow the advice of his attorneys. And exactly when this goes to trial is going to be particularly interesting, right? As we lose our feed here temporarily, we're going to be bouncing around to several different feeds here, but the next 12 months are crucial for a presidential candidate. Doesn't matter if you're a former president like Donald Trump. Doesn't matter if you are somebody who is seeking the office for the first time, like Ron DeSantis. Doesn't matter if you're the incumbent in Joe Biden. The next really 14, 15 months or so are absolutely crucial. Every day can be used to stake your ground in one particular state, especially battleground states or early primary states or an early caucus state like Iowa. However, how much Trump is and how much of his team is diverted away from campaigning and focused on answering these charges. And again, currently three sets of charges that are playing out in different jurisdictions across the country. We have in Florida, one more time, the charges alleging that he illegally hoarded classified documents from Washington, D.C. from his first term in office down to Mar-a-Lago. Then you have the charges in New York related to the Stormy Daniels hush money payments. And now you have the charges here pertaining to the allegations of seeking to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. All three of these could be unfolding in courtrooms across the country over the next year plus. How much that detracts from Trump's ability to effectively campaign for president, whether or not those legal situations hurt or even help him as far as exposure with the American public, that all remains to be seen. But here we have the Trump motorcade, led by a police escort, making their way through, of course, the busy streets, the busy roadways of Washington, D.C. And there you saw the motorcade pass on by. And now we're back with the feed from inside the press van, and you're getting a live look at Washington, D.C. traffic, the traffic we talked about a few minutes ago. And it would appear that they are going around a lot of this traffic. This is what happens when you've served as president of the United States. You're getting a police escort around some of the busiest traffic in our country, 4 lanes of it. There you can see as they are currently taking the exit ramp on this expressway, as you're looking again here inside the press van, or the front window of the press van. So for those of you just joining us, welcome in. You're currently looking at a live feed from inside the motorcade of the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, as he makes his way to the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., ahead of his 4 o'clock arraignment. What's going to happen in the next really 30 to 40 minutes or so? Trump is expected to arrive at the courthouse early, where he is expected to be formally booked and processed on the 4 felony counts as a result of the special counsel by Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith filing these 4 felony charges in relation to seeking to overturn the 2020 presidential election. We'll go over those charges a little bit more, but they include, of course, allegations related to what happened on January 6th, the riots that led to rioters storming the Capitol. Includes a conspiracy to defraud the United States government and conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. So you're looking here live at the motorcade. So the Trump motorcade is being navigated around some of the worst traffic as they get closer to Capitol Hill. And now you can see some of the demonstrators. Look out the window here. You can see crowds of demonstrators. Difficult to see. There you can see a Trump flag. Difficult to see exactly where everybody is stationed and whether or not we're seeing more as we get access now to a new feed. Difficult to see if we are seeing more supporters of the 45th president, supporters of the 45th president, or opponents of the 45th president. And there you can see the security detail. One thing that was made abundantly clear by Capitol Police, by Metro Police, in advance of today, is that they were going to be taking tremendous caution when it came to just securing Capitol Hill and making sure that there are no incidents, that everybody is safe and are able to demonstrate peacefully. And we can now say that Donald Trump has arrived at the complex of the federal courthouse, where he is going to be taken into the courthouse to be formally booked and processed on the 4 felony charges from Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith. Joining us here on stream, WFLA investigator Masa Saidi. Masa.
I'm sorry I'm late, JP.
Masa is a little bit late, but
sorry.
hopefully people are more forgiving than I am as far as our stream audience.
I'm sorry, JP.
It's all right. Welcome in.
Yes, you did a great job.
What's the latest on what you've been working on this all day? What are you hearing?
And that's why I'm late. I'm so sorry. I've talked with 3 attorneys, 3 local experts, trying to get a little bit more context. Of course, we've all read the 45-page indictment that accuses the former president of conspiracy to violate civil rights, people's rights to vote, conspiracy to defraud the U.S., obstruction of an official proceeding, and conspiracy to commit that crime. But I've been talking with various experts, including John Fitzgibbons. Now, he once worked in the same unit as Special Counsel Jack Smith at a different time, the Public Integrity section of the Department of Justice. And he says that this is a very, very strong indictment. He points to the evidence that the government presents, which basically they're using Trump's own people to build this case against him, basically saying that in 2020, the former president knew that he lost the election, and yet he continued to lie to keep power. And the indictment basically says you're allowed to lie, you're allowed to spread false information about the election, but what you cannot do, and I wish I had it here in front of me, but it says what you cannot do is take people's rights away. It's page 2 of the indictment. Do you have it in front of you by chance?
I don't have the indictment in front of me at the moment.
I think I emailed it to myself. Give me just 1 second, because I think this is an important point to where, because they're bringing up Mr. Trump's supporters, the fact that the First Amendment allows you to say whatever you would like. And, this is where I want to point this out here in the indictment. Give me just 1 second. It says, you can lie, essentially, but you can't pursue, quote, unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting the election. That's on page 2, and I just had to read that because that's such an important point to make here. But, so that's what Mr. Fitzgibbons lays out as why this is such a very strong case. He thinks that the former Vice President Mike Pence is going to be a very big star witness here, although I've heard other experts say that it's not any one witness that this case is going to hinge on. It's all of the witnesses that have already testified to the grand jury. These are people who loved Mr. Trump, people on his staff, Republican lawmakers, just the people that have come out and spoken against him right now. Now, we are looking a live scene at outside federal court in Washington, D.C. And last time I was here with you, JB, we were it was a documents case, Mar-a-Lago, a totally different venue, a venue that is much more friendly to the former president, to be frank. There's not a lot of people in D.C. that are probably fans of the president. It's heavily known to be Democratic. These are people that they lived through January 6th. They remember what happened on that day. This was something that had happened in their own, hometown. So that's one of the things that the attorney John Fitzgibbons talked about with me. Is one of the very first things that the Trump legal team is going to do is to try to get this case out of Washington, D.C., perhaps to Virginia, Maryland. I think Mr. Trump floated the idea of West Virginia at some point. Lots of fans that he has there. But I don't know what you want to talk about, JB. I'm like overwhelmed with information now.
Yeah, there's a lot. Really quickly, I want to take an opportunity because you brought up a person that you interviewed by the name of John Fitzgibbons. Is that correct? And we have a clip, so I want you to just kind of tee that up because hearing from him, I know, is going to be interesting. We have several different experts we're going to bring in on stream here.
Yeah, so this is somebody, I try to get, I'm very, very committed to always having, both sides, people that have different viewpoints. So this is someone who believes that the indictment is very strong. Again, this is a a former federal prosecutor. He worked in this public integrity section at DOJ, and that's the section, if you're not familiar, where anytime a governor or a congressperson, when they're going after them for ethical things, this is where that arises out of. But he talked about why he thinks that this indictment is so incredibly strong, and to just listen to what my photojournalist partner Jim Hockett put together in sound bites.
It's a powerful indictment. Most of these witnesses, if not all of them, are people that worked for him, that loved him, that cared for him, his staff people, his campaign people. There are repeated and repeated and repeated witnesses that are described in the indictment as having told him, you've lost the election. His own people told him that. So any reasonable person would conclude he knew he lost the election.
What do you say to Americans who believe that all this is because some just don't want Trump to run again?
Well, at the end of the day, I hope that this trial will be televised so all of America can watch it.
So federal courts don't allow for cameras. That's why we can't see anything in there today. But the Chief Justice for Congress could allow for cameras, and that's what he was saying, that he hopes that cameras are allowed. And I hope that we're going to show the other soundbite of the other side soon.
We will.
Yeah.
We're going to get to that in just a moment. But really curious to me. So you're saying is that there is a chance that there could be cameras allowed in the courtroom for a trial when it does in fact take place.
The Chief Justice could make that determination, that because this is arguably the biggest federal case in the history of the United States. You know, I know a lot of people are getting tired because here we are, the former president's been indicted. The former president is getting arraigned. That first case was out of Manhattan State Court. A trial date has been set for March 24th. On that case, it was 34 counts. It had to do with alleged hush money payments made to cover up an alleged affair. Mr. Trump has said none of that is true. We had the Mar-a-Lago case, which in June we were here for that. That trial date has also been set for that case, 40 counts, May 20th of 2024. But this, the people that I'm talking with, I also talked with suspended state attorney in Hillsborough, Andrew Warren, about this. He is also a former federal prosecutor. He also thought this was a very strong case, but a lot of legal observers think that this case is a lot stronger because what Mr. Trump is being accused of is trying to destroy democracy. Now, I will say, is it a good time to bring in the other side with this gentleman?
In just a moment, because
Okay.
I want to
Go
capitalize. I want to take a moment here to ask our audience about live the thought that we're so used to covering cases on WFLA now, where when it's in federal court, Masa, no cameras are allowed inside. That's why sketch artists have the job that they do, is because it's so often in a federal court jurisdiction or with a particular federal judge, you're just not going to have cameras permitted inside, whether it's still cameras or video feeds of any kind. So that's interesting. So we're going to ask here, do you think video cameras and live feeds should be allowed if this case goes to trial? And I'll be very curious because this is a very curious question, because even if you are a supporter of Donald Trump, you want to see him in office again, you could still answer this question and say, yeah, you want to see what the evidence is. You want to see exactly what was turned up. You want to see this play out legally because, you know, it's a chance for us to view how our legal process, how our legal system works in this country with the most, highly elected position in our Constitution. So I'm going to ask that now in the YouTube live comment section. Do you think video cameras and live feed should be allowed if this case goes to trial, and we'll monitor that as they come in? Now, it's probably more likely than not that cameras won't be allowed inside, right? Is that what you would say? You're a former prosecutor, so.
Well, I mean, I don't really have any experience this is so unprecedented. I can't really make any sort of prediction as to what's going to happen. I think clearly there are arguments to be made for allowing cameras in the courtroom. As a journalist, I always want cameras in every courtroom, and I want to televise and also online on WFLA now. So that's
right,
what I
yes.
think. But I think it could go either way. I keep thinking, this is totally unrelated, but I keep thinking about Watergate and when they started to have the committee hearings and they televised them, and then America became so into it, and it kind of changed the narrative for Nixon. Not to compare those two things, but I think when you see it play out, it could go either way. You can't guess which way it's going to go. So it might pose a greater risk for the president? I'm not sure. But
Yeah,
yeah, it can happen. I don't know if it will happen. I don't want to put a percentage on it because I just don't know. But it's something that it is possible where they could allow that. The Chief Justice could allow that. Congress could mandate that.
And I've talked about this in the past about courtroom access with cameras and live feeds. And when you have a situation where there's children potentially involved, juveniles potentially, but minors, when you have something where there's classified documents that that need to be, held behind closed doors for, let's say, national security or another reason, of course, where you just do not want classified information getting onto the public, certain scenarios, totally understand what the logic is, what the reasoning is for a video camera and a live feed not being permitted in the courtroom. But with something like this, it would be a fascinating debate, right, about whether or not the American public should be able to basically have a seat in that courtroom. But we'll, of course, we might come back to that in a little bit.
Did we just lose the feed?
We did just lose the feed, and we'll see if we can bring up a backup feed in the meantime. I think we have another. Oh, no, it's back. And this is now some breaking news just coming in that Trump has officially surrendered at the courthouse on election charges. Stand by. We'll be right back in 60 seconds.
WFLA Now will begin momentarily. WFLA Now will begin momentarily. Breaking news on WFLA Now. Here's JB Buno.
The 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, has turned himself in, surrendering on 4 felony charges at a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., on charges that he sought to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. You're looking here live outside the courthouse. We have live coverage here on WFLA Now. Hello there to you folks. Now engaging an audience on all platforms here in the Stream Center, being joined by WFLA investigator Masa Saidi, who is working this story, and we'll have more tonight at 6 o'clock on your NBC station here in Tampa, Florida, WFLA News Channel 8. I'm JB Buno. Let's go here full screen and show you the scene outside of the courthouse. We have a couple of different angles to show you outside of the courthouse. We have one closer up and one a little bit farther away. We have seen demonstrators gather outside of the courthouse here in in Washington, D.C. And Masa, you were noting earlier, I thought this was obviously a very curious observation, different greeting, if you will, welcoming as far as the difference between now and his most previous arraignment, which was here in the state of Florida, where there was just hundreds, if not thousands of supporters that were there to meet him and welcome him in Florida. Here in Washington, D.C., just the tenor and the tone today is clearly much different.
You have to obviously take note of the fact that Washington, D.C. is a Democratic city, that this is the place where January 6th happened. A lot of people were there. They witnessed it. So this is about as unfriendly of an environment to the former president as you can get in Manhattan. That first case was also an unfriendly environment, that state court case that's set for trial on March 25th. The 34 counts stemming from alleged hush money payments made and during the election. This is also a venue that is not very friendly. In June, when we were last talking together, JB, that had to do with the Mar-a-Lago case that was in Florida, where Mr. Trump has a lot more supporters. The judge in that case was a Trump appointee. The judge in this case, not the judge that we're going to see today, the former president is scheduled to appear at 4 o'clock before a magistrate judge, not the judge that is assigned to handle this criminal case moving forward. But in this DC case, the judge is an Obama appointee, and prior to being appointed to the bench, she had contributed to his campaign as well. She's also not saying that that makes her biased in any way, just trying to give you guys some context. But she's also known to have a history of being fairly tough, JB, on the January 6th protesters with the sentences that she has handed down. So this is a very different environment for the former president. A lot of legal observers say that this is a more serious case. As we imagine, some of the public, all these cases are starting to bleed together, right, JB? It's hard to keep them straight unless you work in news, and this is actually your job to keep these cases straight. But it's a very somber day, and these are very serious charges that the former president is facing. How strong the case is, it depends on who you ask. I've talked with people that think it's strong and legal observers that think that it's not so strong, that this special counsel, Jack Smith, is basically using the law in a very novel and unprecedented way to build a case against the president. He wasn't charged yet anyway with inciting January 6th. He was basically, charged with the conspiracy to stay in power and to defraud the government and to take people's votes, and knowing that he had lost the election. But still very serious charges, even though the special counsel didn't throw as more serious charges, sedition and things like that, inciting January 6th, what he could have done. We didn't see that, but this is still, a very serious case. I think it's up to 50 years that if convicted, he could potentially face.
That's, of course, we're talking about unprecedented territories. We're here with Masa Saidi. I'm JB Buno here. We're looking at a live feed from outside the federal courthouse. As a reminder, the arraignment is expected to, of course, begin at 4 o'clock Eastern time in a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. Live cameras, live feeds, not permitted. No video cameras or cameras really of any kind permitted inside of the court. The only way we're going to be able to see inside the courthouse, as we understand it, is through sketches, courtroom sketch artists. So we'll be paying close attention to that. I believe that we do have, through our affiliated partners, we are going to be getting some courtroom sketches in at some point in the next hour or so. Trump has turned himself in. He is now being formally booked and processed as if it were really any other case, although I'm sure that there are certain specific parts of the booking process that are unique to a former president being formally processed as far as ahead of this arraignment goes. But I want to remind our audience, if you're joining us on Facebook Live or on YouTube Live, you can comment at us. We're going to start to spotlight some of your comments on screen. Any questions that you might have, you can use hashtag HeyJB or hashtag HeyMasa in the comment section. I'll be the one looking through these comments, making sure, of course, that we get both sides, that we have questions that carry the conversation forward, that we also, of course, have both sides represented here. Let's listen. Who's this here speaking?
The fact that I am standing here for the third time in 5 months is not a coincidence. This is the Biden political lawfare that we have seen time and time again. It is a deflection from everything that they have done. And if you don't believe me, look at the facts. On March 17th, Hunter accidentally admits that it was his laptop from hell. The next day, DA Alvin Bragg indicts President Trump. June 8th, an FBI document is released showing that the Ukrainians paid the Biden crime family millions and millions of dollars. The next day, the Mar-a-Lago raid and the Mar-a-Lago indictment. Last week, Hunter Biden's sweetheart plea deal fell through when the judge realized it had blanket immunity. The following day, a superseding indictment against Donald Trump. July 31st, Devin Archer goes to testify in front of the House. That was only after they failed to put him in jail prior to the fact. What happens the next day? The January 6th indictment that we're here for today. This is not a coincidence. This is election interference at its finest. against the leading candidate right now for president, for either party. President Trump is under siege in a way that we have never seen before. President Trump and his legal team and everyone on his team will continue to fight, not for him, but for the American people. I'll take some questions.
Thank you. I know the president has called this a witch hunt. You just laid out several examples of that. Any other thoughts that the president has communicated to you in terms of why this is going on and then why he calls it a witch hunt?
I think a witch hunt is really the way that anybody should describe this, because it's not something we've seen in our time. This is not even political. This is beyond that. A witch hunt is when you relentlessly attack your opponent, when you relentlessly attack the thing that you are most afraid of. People are afraid of somebody that cannot be bought by Washington. People are afraid of somebody who is independently wealthy and who has given up his good life to fight for this country. And that frightens a lot of politicians who are career politicians, unfortunately, because he'll get back there, and I know he'll be fighting for every one of us so that this doesn't happen to us.
You see, this case is about free speech, but the special counsel says Trump could have disagreed with the results and talked about it. No crime there. The difference is what he did to try and switch the votes.
So what is it that he did to try and switch the votes that you refer to? By bringing cases, by using the law in an appropriate manner, unlike what we're sitting here today seeing. This is not appropriate. What President Trump did is he said, go patriotically and peacefully and protest. That is an American right. That is why we are America and we are not a third world country. Although I will say that today, I don't feel very much like we are in America. Yes.
This case should go forward before or after the 2024 presidential election?
I think that every court needs to look at this as a whole, right? It's not about the January 6th case. It's about the fact that in the matter of a couple months, we have seen them try and tie up, and me as an attorney, have never seen this, tie up one individual who's running a campaign, in a campaign, running for office for president, so that he is in court, in depositions, and distracted, so that he won't properly run for 2024. And frankly, it's not going to work.
Is the legal team going to argue that the election was stolen?
I don't think that that's the argument that needs to be made. I think that anybody that believes that is misreading this. The truth is, as an American, there were questions that he had regarding the election integrity. We've seen documents come out, we've seen documentaries come out showing that there were issues with the election. And frankly, by bringing this, I don't think Jack Smith really thought it through. There only has to be proof that, number one, President Trump believed that this election was not completely honest. And number two, Jack Smith has opened himself up to a can of worms that we can now look at and really examine.
If you believe that he's innocent and that this is all a setup, why not bring it to trial as soon as possible before the election so that you can clear his name?
Yeah, I would love to do that, but there's something called discovery, and when somebody wants to say that the 2020 election was perfect and that President Trump has no right to object to it, we've got to go show him all the facts, and there's a lot of facts to show. So everybody has their time, and to say that Donald Trump should then be rushed and not be given the same fair proceeding that anybody else is just, frankly, un-American. It's not fair. It's not the way our system works.
A lot of the lawyers who helped him try to overturn the election are unnamed co-conspirators in the indictment. Jenna Ellis isn't. Why do you think that is?
I'm not going to speak to co-conspirators or anybody else. I represent President Trump.
Let's go one more.
Alina, there are a number of, there's testimony and there's a number of aides that have said that the president was made aware that he lost the election and yet continued to argue that it was stolen from him. How do you reconcile those two things?
Well, I think that everybody was made aware that he lost the election, but that doesn't mean that that was the only advice he was given. As anybody understands what happens in the Oval Office, there are a numerous amount of advisors and politicians and lawyers, not just one or two, that are giving you advice and telling you what they believe is true. So he may not agree with Mike Pence, he may not agree with one of his lawyers, but that doesn't mean that there weren't other people advising him exactly the opposite. And the president has a right, as every one of us do, to listen to several opinions and make their decision.
Yeah, I remember hearing Hillary Clinton and Stacey Abrams argue their elections were not right.
Absolutely.
I mean, and the weaponization of the DOJ didn't happen then.
No, of course not. But if your last name's Trump, it's very different. So Hillary Clinton could have a problem when she lost the election, and we could have a complete liberal meltdown, as we all saw. But when we have dignified disagreements, we take them to court, we say do things patriotically and peacefully, he's to blame for things that he did not himself do. And that's what we're seeing. Frankly, folks, this is not about that. This is about politics. This is about 2024. Period. The end.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Alina Habba, a Trump attorney and spokeswoman, speaking here outside of the federal courthouse. The press seemed to have known that that was going to be taking place. That's why the cameras pivoted to this particular shot as we look here at the federal courthouse complex, where Donald Trump is about 20 minutes away from being arraigned in front of a federal judge. Being joined here by Masa Saidi, a former New York City prosecutor, joining us here on stream. And Masa, anything noteworthy there that you want to reference before we move on?
I guess what stood out to me is that, she's really making the same argument that I've heard that a lot of people that are on Mr. Trump's side make, questioning the timing of this indictment, questioning why it's happening now, so long after January 6th. And you heard her basically lay out that every time like something happens with the Biden family, then they're trying to take attention away from that by charging Mr. Trump. She also talked about how the special counsel is opening up a can of worms. That's something that I heard from someone else that was making a pro Mr. Trump argument today. I interviewed Patrick LeDuc, a criminal defense attorney who has represented one of the local January 6th defendants here in Tampa. And she also talked about how he truly believed that the election had been stolen. So it didn't matter that maybe one advisor or one attorney told him that that wasn't to be the case, that he truly believed this. And to have a conspiracy, you have to have an unlawful purpose. And if the president...
I have clips for you, so if there's a clip that you want me to queue up, you just tell me.
Yeah, I'll queue it up in 1 second. I'll take the Patrick LeDuc in 1 second. But if Mr. Trump truly believed that the election was stolen, some of his supporters say that the case then falls apart, that the government cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Trump knew he had lost the election, that this was a conspiracy, an unlawful conspiracy to remain in power. But yeah, it's a good time to play that exchange. This is somebody that thinks that this indictment is nonsense and an overreach and that he's being targeted.
And one more time, we're about to hear from
Patrick LeDuc. He's a criminal defense attorney and a former prosecutor with the Army, and he has represented one of the January 6th defendants here locally.
Back here in less than a minute.
I think that the allegations brought against him are unprecedented. This prosecutor chose not to prosecute him for sedition and chose not to prosecute him for inciting an insurrection. So they brought a case against him on J6 on a novel legal theory that's never been tried, never been tested.
What do you say to Americans who believe Mr. Trump tried to destroy our democracy?
If we don't start learning how to give one another grace and a little bit of forgiveness, we're going to tear ourselves apart. There is no guarantee that our country's going to have tomorrow.
So that was Mr. LeDuc, and I want to cue up the soundbite again because we now have our Facebook audience here, and for balance purposes across all platforms, we want to make sure that we're showing that Masa, of course, interviewing attorneys representing both sides of the argument as far as, again, this unprecedented situation that we find ourselves in legally as a former president of the United States is being prosecuted on 4 felony charges today in our nation's capital. So the next one, again, who we heard from is Mr. Fitzgibbons, correct?
That's right. John Fitzgibbons, a former federal prosecutor.
And you interviewed him today specifically about
the strength of the indictment.
About the strength of the indictment. Let's hear from him, and back in less than 60 seconds.
It's a powerful indictment. Most of these witnesses, if not all of them, are people that worked for him, that loved him, that cared for him, his staff people, his campaign people. There are repeated and repeated and repeated witnesses that are described in the indictment as having told him, you've lost the election. His own people told him that. So any reasonable person would conclude he knew he lost the election.
What do you say to Americans who believe that all this is because some just don't want Trump to run again?
Well, at the end of the day, I hope that this trial will be televised so all of America can watch it.
And that brings us back to our poll question. Let's bring up another live feed as that one just went down, showing us a wide shot of just how many media organizations, and also, too, you might see some demonstrators here in Washington, D.C., outside the federal courthouse where Donald Trump is set to be arraigned in about 15 minutes' time. We asked in a Facebook Live and YouTube Live poll, do you think video cameras and live feeds should be allowed inside the courtroom if this case should go to trial. What I want to do now is spotlight specifically your hashtag HeyJB or hashtag HeyMasa questions and comments, but really your comments now. We want your answers to that question. Do you think cameras should be allowed? Do you think that live feeds should be allowed? Should this go to trial at some point later this year or next year? As again, we are gearing up for November of next year, Election Day 2024. Do you think that we, the American public, should be allowed to watch this all unfold in a federal courtroom? Or do you think that, like most federal cases, it should be barred from video cameras and live streaming? Use hashtag HeyMasa, hashtag HeyJB, and we'll start to bring up your feedback now. Masa, any guess as to what you think? I have the poll results here on my screen. What would you guess? Just give me.
I think I think people that are tuning in to this live feed like live feeds. So I'm going to say, JB, 85%, they're going to want to have cameras. And of course, most federal courts don't allow cameras. It's against the federal rules of criminal procedure. But the Chief Justice or Congress could allow for cameras in this case, given just what a big deal that it is and how much interest that there is surrounding this case and how,
Masa's logic
to divide our country. What is it?
Your
85%?
logic is spot on. We'll go to the results in just a minute. We're going to let everybody vote, and we're going to spend the next couple of minutes just talking about whether or not the American public should hear the actual case presented by the prosecution. Here, of course, Trump's defense attorneys present their defense. Of course, they have already made some arguments publicly talking about Trump's First Amendment rights, but how that all plays out in a courtroom, should the American public be able to witness that? We'll start to spotlight some comments coming in now.
And so many people want to witness this, of course. There's like journalists and that are like sleeping outside trying to get in to watch this. But my understanding is that this is a lottery. So even if you stayed there all night or got some poor intern to stay outside all day trying to get in, it's a lottery system. Everyone wants to see this for themselves. And it's frustrating even for me to have to report this on television when I'm not there. So it's like we watch our affiliate, NBC, and we have to just report what they're reporting. So it would certainly make my job so much easier if I could watch it happening and not have to listen to NBC and see what they're saying and then pass that on, which we're allowed to do because we're within NBC. But yeah.
Linda says, hashtag HJB, saying, yes, the American public should have it televised, no matter how one falls on the political spectrum. This is still a former president being accused of some serious crimes. So that's the opinion of one of our commenters.
Crazy prepper Linda.
If you were, I want you to, you're an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to play attorney for a second. If you're Trump's attorney, do you want this televised?
No.
No, you don't.
Mm-mm.
You don't want cameras in the courtroom. You want
I don't
it
think
to
so.
be.
I think it makes it more a chaotic environment, and you just never know. Again, going back to that amazing podcast I just listened to that was all about Nixon and Watergate, you just never know how things will play out once you start to televise every second of it. And, from what we have seen in the still images, Mr. Trump doesn't look so happy or so comfortable sitting at that table labeled as a criminal defendant. So
Lee says, hashtag KJB, America deserves transparency. Yes to cameras. I'm seeing a lot of support for cameras in the courtroom. Ive says, hashtag KJB, this is definitely a witch hunt. So
a lot
obvious.
of people think that.
A lot of people think that there is political motivations here, clearly. Let's see, hear this. Mercedes-Benz asks for you, hashtag HeyMasa, if Trump goes to prison, would he be able to run for president in 2024?
Yeah, so there's nothing in the Constitution that would prevent him from running for office if he's convicted. I don't believe there's even anything that, would stop it from happening, even let's say he is president and the case continues. So, it's a very gray area in the law right now, but he can run even if he's convicted.
We're already in a unprecedented situation, and the last few years with everything that has unfolded from January 6th up until this point has made us sort of question, my goodness, is this actually happening? The idea of the 45th president being placed behind bars and then still being an eligible presidential candidate, I mean, we are getting into territory that would get tossed out of Hollywood in 5 seconds. I mean, really. I mean, as far as the crazy, the lunacy that would come with just that concept, the fact that somebody could be locked up and still receiving votes for president of the United States. But again, we are a long way away from, he has to be, of course, a trial process has to unfold. And then, of course, there has to be a conviction and innocent until proven guilty. It's important to remind our audience of that.
And the Constitution says that you have to be 35, that you have to be born in the United States, but there's nothing that would prevent him from running for president or even from serving as president from prison even. So
Lil Patty says, hashtags for us both, innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. No one is above the law, says Lil Patty as well.
That's true.
Miss Shell says, absolutely it should. He's a civilian, not a president. I mean,
I don't think it has to do with the fact that he's a president or he's not a president. I think it more has to do with the federal rules of criminal procedure that prevent cameras in general. I think they don't even let you have your cell phone in there. You got to lock up your cell phone before you walk in.
Carol on Facebook Live. Yes, I do think media and cameras in the courtroom, people of the USA have every right to see this case as it's happening. So we spent a good amount of time talking about that. I'll share that our poll results, and we're about to close them here in just a second. 91% of people on YouTube Live say yes, allow cameras and live feeds should this go to trial. On Facebook Live, a little bit less, and our Facebook Live audience, we know, tends to lean more conservative. So Facebook Live, it's 86%, but not nearly as many votes as YouTube Live. So on both platforms, more than 85%, Masa.
You got it
people,
right.
Yeah,
I got it right, JB.
Yeah, you nailed it on Facebook.
I just want to say that a Trump attorney has entered the courtroom right now, so we are getting closer, just 8 minutes out right now from when we expect the president to plead, of course, not guilty to these charges.
Jack Smith, I'm seeing here in updates, has also arrived in the courtroom. Of course, that is the special counsel who has filed the indictment against the 45th president of the United States. And so we'll be monitoring courtroom updates. Do we know if reporters have their devices in there? Do you know if they're able to live tweet from the courtroom? That I couldn't find that out.
Yeah, no, and typically you cannot have your cell phone in there. That's why you see reporters run out before it's even done. That's why some of the information we get at the very beginning isn't always accurate, because as soon as they listen to him say not guilty, they race out and we won't know what's going to happen next in the case. Just so you know, I'm also listening to reporters in the courtroom in this year.
Yeah.
Trying to keep it all.
We're juggling.
Make sure I'm giving everyone
a lot as well.
Yeah. I do see just a very small amount of demonstrators outside the courthouse. And this shot that I'm looking at right now says lock him up. So it's people that are not supportive of the president.
As
but
you
very
noted
few.
earlier, very different scene from South Florida.
Yeah.
When we covered the previous arraignment. And
reporters are saying that Jack Smith is just feet away from President Trump at this point. So
we're also hearing reports from, again, there's runners coming out of the courtroom and passing along some small details. Usually, I don't know if it's being written on paper or how. There's a small trickle, a very slight trickle, if you will, of information coming out of the courtroom right now. The one thing that I keep seeing from several different reports is that it's quiet. It's not a lot of chatter going on, and even if there is a chatter, it's just very quiet in the courtroom is basically what they're talking about right now.
Yes.
It's not very
Everyone
lively.
is trying to, reporters are trying to look at the former president, describe his demeanor, see if he's looking at the special counsel, Jack Smith. That ends up being what you report at the end of this. So now we're about 6 minutes away. The president is going to appear before a magistrate judge. And again, the 4 counts that he's facing: conspiracy to violate rights, people's right to vote, 5 years in prison if you're convicted for that. Conspiracy to defraud the U.S., again, 5 years in prison. And then obstruction of an official proceeding, the January 6th certification of the election, and conspiracy to commit that crime, in each of those punishable by up to 20 years in prison. But we do expect that the former president is going to plead not guilty in about 5 minutes before a magistrate judge, the federal district court, right there in Washington, D.C.
So I'm punching in a new question. Again, one more time, we had about 1,500 votes on YouTube Live. And we asked the question, do you think video cameras and live feeds should be allowed if this case goes to trial? 91% of poll respondents in an unscientific social media YouTube Live poll saying yes, they do want to see cameras and live feeds in the courtroom should this go to trial. Our next question that we are going to ask, and this one's going to be exclusive to YouTube Live, Facebook Live, if you want to vote in the poll, please do so on the WFLA YouTube page. You can join us in the YouTube Live comment section. This poll, we're going to ask, do you think the felony charges against Trump ahead of the 2024 election are politically motivated? And you, Masa, asked, this is something that came up in your interviews over the course of today. There are people that believe that this is all coming out in the lead up to the 2024 race, specifically at this time, that this is a politically motivated set of circumstances that are unfolding legally.
Yeah, and the Patrick LeDuc that I interviewed, again, he's a criminal defense attorney. He was a former prosecutor with the Army, and he represented one of the January 6th defendants here locally. He definitely thinks that Jack Smith is, I mean, he talked about how Jack Smith is someone who in the past has used novel theories to go after high-level people. That's what he claims is happening here. He's saying when Congress passed the laws, that they passed the laws that Mr. Trump is now accused of violating, they weren't thinking about this type of criminality. So he's saying that the law is being stretched to find wrongdoing. And again, that they're not saying that Mr. Trump incited January 6th or, you know, is responsible for seditious activities, but instead that he lied about having lost the election and that there was a conspiracy for him to remain in power, and he essentially wanted to get rid of the votes, legit votes of much of the American public. But what this LeDuc, what this Mr. LeDuc, this attorney, said is they were not in his mind, and they can't prove that Mr. Trump didn't truly believe that he had won the election. So that's kind of the question, like, you know, that one attorney, Fitzgibbon, said it's very clear from the indictment that Mr. Trump knew that he wasn't, that he had lost the election, that he just wanted to keep power regardless. But a different person that had read that same indictment, Mr. LeDuc, said that's absolutely not clear from the indictment, that they can't know what was in his head. And that Trump attorney that came out and just addressed the reporters right before this third arraignment, she was saying kind of a similar thing, that it didn't matter what one advisor or one attorney told Mr. Trump, that there was a lot of people in his ear. So it didn't matter if maybe Mike Pence thought that he had lost the election. There were people, I guess, that truly thought that Mr. Trump had won. That's what supporters of the former president are saying.
Again, if you're just joining us, Donald Trump has entered the courtroom as of 3:51 Eastern time. He walked in with his attorneys, Todd Blanche and John Lauro, and he sat at the defense table, flanked by both of his attorneys. He's just sitting there and whispering back and forth with his attorneys, according to reports coming out of the courtroom. Again, if you're just joining us, we're now 1 minute away from the scheduled start time of 4 o'clock Eastern for the arraignment of the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. This is the third set of charges that he is facing, but the first one in Washington, D.C., these federal felony charges that have been filed against him in relation to the allegations of overturning or seeking to overturn the 2020 presidential election results. We'll, of course, do the best version of play-by-play that we can as word trickles out of the courthouse as to how things are unfolding inside the courthouse, we'll, of course, pass that along to you. We have reporters with different affiliated organizations that are providing us with information, and that is getting distributed out to members of the press like Masa and myself. But we're also going to be featuring your comments as well for a little bit. Masa's going to spend another 10, maybe at the very most 15 minutes with us. We're also going to be featuring WFLA Tallahassee Capitol Bureau reporter Libby Dean on stream here in just a little bit. But again, we're asking in our poll question, people who believe in our comment section, Masa, we've been talking about this. When we don't ignore our social media comment section here on stream. That is something that's very important to us because we want to bring you into our conversation, folks. We want to spotlight how you feel. There are news organizations that don't give a you-know-what about how you feel. As far as the scrolling comments that are coming in on social media, we're paying close attention to how you feel about Donald Trump's arraignment today. And there are a volume of people, a good amount of people, that do believe that this is happening at a very specific time in relation to the year plus before the 2024 presidential election. So we're asking in our question, do you believe that these charges ahead of the 2024 election are politically motivated? And we're going to spotlight your comments. I can tell you right now that the poll results that are coming in are very interesting, Masa.
Yeah.
We'll let them we'll let people to continuously vote here on the WFLA YouTube page, and then we'll kind of look at those. But this is also an open floor, folks, for you to comment along with us. You can use hashtag HeyMasa or hashtag HeyJB. But let's go to this question really quickly. You want to make a point real quick?
Yeah, I just was going to say, it's just reading what reporters are saying. It's just interesting. Apparently, the Trump team has handed this flyer to basically their main message, their main point to reporters that are there. And it's basically trying to portray the indictment as a cover-up by the Democrats to try to protect President Biden and his son Hunter. And just the format of this flyer that they handed out.
I'm going to try to find a picture.
Can I show it to you? I have it right here.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to put it up.
Yeah, I'll put it up right now. It's exactly
This is again a flyer that is being handed out by the Trump team to reporters.
Yeah, it's being handed out by the Trump team to reporters, and it kind of just says what their main point is, what that Mr. Trump's lawyer, the points that she was making when she stepped out to talk with reporters just a couple minutes before the indictment. Don't fall asleep, phone. But yeah, there you can see that they have a picture of President Trump, and it says versus, it has a picture of Hunter Biden during a difficult time of his life when he was addicted to drugs, and President Biden basically saying, expose the government, targets Trump. And it must be a new thing that politicians are doing, because often when I go to press conferences with Governor DeSantis, we always get these flyers as well, which actually look very much like this, where they have their main points, the points that they want. They basically hand out their talking points to reporters. Very interesting, because it looks exactly like this. And, I don't...
Like an infographic for a press release.
Yeah, so basically, I think they're just hoping that some reporters, which would happen and could happen possibly in smaller local markets, where you just go read from that, basically, to report what they want you to report.
That's why we're reacting that way, is because that would, we gather our own information and we report information. We don't, I'm sorry, continue.
Well, not today. Today we're listening to what's happening in the courtroom and hoping to get it to you with one ear. We're listening to what's happening. Right. But I just wanted to also say the New York Times is reporting, this is just interesting, that the chief judge of the district court is apparently in the courtroom just to observe the proceedings. The judge that's going to be, in charge of this. The chief judge is James Boasberg. I hope I pronounced his name correctly, but he's just coming in to watch. I mean, who knows why he's doing it? I think many people want a seat in that courtroom, but the judge that's going to be in charge of this, she's not going to be overseeing this today. It's unclear when she and Mr. Trump will meet face to face. But prosecutors are in the courtroom. Jack Smith is not at the main table, but he's in the bench in the back, but fairly close to President Trump. 12 minutes ago, President Trump entered the room. His lawyers are there. And, so it could be underway right now. It's 4:04 p.m. So this was scheduled to begin
According
at 4.
According to our NBC News friends,
What are they saying?
The correspondents, Trump right now is signing a document in the courtroom where he just finished signing some documents. It says Trump signed a paper handed to him by his defense attorney, John Lauro.
Okay.
Both sides have now returned to their respective tables where they appear to be waiting for the judge to enter. Trump continues to talk to his lawyers with his hands clasped.
I have
in
that
front of him.
too. I have the Mr. Trump clasped and unclasped and then reclasped his hands, and he's just feet away from Jack Smith. So this is why it would be nice to have cameras in the courtroom, that we're not trolling like trusted news sources for what's happening.
Like play-by-play.
The play-by-play, just trying to understand.
But Masa, real quick, because Cassandra's comment has been up for a long time. Again, you can use hashtag HeyMasa or hashtag HeyJB with your social media comment. We can bring them up on screen like this. And she asks, can Trump pardon himself if he becomes president?
Yes, and if he becomes president, you would imagine he would have a new attorney general that could withdraw this case, and it could just be bye-bye, over, gone.
It all goes away.
Yeah, it all goes away.
It all goes away.
And,
maybe day one.
Yeah, to be, that could be part of the strategy for the team to delay this until he's, in power, and then you could just, and their view, they think this is political, so they could just get rid of it.
The judge is yet to arrive.
Is that what you have?
Yes.
Okay.
The judge is yet to
arrive. The
arrive.
judge is 6 minutes late.
And so Trump has been in there with his attorneys now for, I believe, 15 minutes.
I'll tell you right now how long Mr. Trump has been there.
15 minutes. He
11. Yeah, I have 11 minutes, but.
Well, the timestamp was he walked in. He walked in at 3:51. So that means 15 minutes he's been sitting there, and they've been waiting for the judge to enter. You can only imagine how tense it is in the room. You could probably cut that tension with a butter knife. I mean, it's probably really, really tense.
And you know what? They must have their phone, because I don't think you can get up and run out. They must have their phones, because they don't have their phones. My photographer's saying they don't. So Jim, how are they? Oh, thank you. That's right.
Usually call it like an auxiliary press room, right?
Yes. Yeah. So that's what. Thank you, Jim. Yes. So yes, I should. They have video of this in another room. So these are people in the other room. So the people that are actually inside the courtroom, they don't have access. That's why I'm like, what's happening? Thank you.
Let's go to some other comments as we wait for updates and the actual arraignment process to begin. Again, the scheduled start time has passed us about 7 minutes ago. But yeah,
It could have started. We don't know yet. Yep, everyone is waiting for the magistrate judge. The New York Times reporting.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to the comment section. Again, I only see, we're here in the Stream Center, folks. I only see comments on my screen if it uses a hashtag like hashtag HeyMasa, hashtag HeyJB. That's pretty much the only way that it pops up here on my screen to the left. You know what, Kel with a very interesting question here, but how do they find a jury that's not tainted or biased if this does go to trial?
Well, the Trump team would say it's not possible. In Washington, D.C., we need to transfer this to West Virginia. That's what they would say. But there's an entire process. I mean, if you've ever had to go to jury duty, I've had to go many times, and I always try so hard to get on that jury because I would love it. And I'm always immediately eliminated for so many different reasons.
Do you
for
hear
being
that?
an attorney.
You hear that United States government? Masa is ready for jury duty.
They will never let me on a jury.
She's ready to sign up.
You can't be an attorney, one. You can't be a journalist, two. And in general, even if I wasn't an attorney or a journalist, I don't think I could sneak my way onto there. But anyway, throughout the process where they're picking jurors, each side asks questions, and they're looking to see if you're against them. And then they have a certain number of jurors that they can basically kick out.
You're going to have alternates, and if there's a discovery of any, significant political bias or something that would make the process, you don't want a hung jury. That's the last thing that you want, because then you got to basically do it all over again, in essence. So, Mary Jane wants to know. Yes, that's the name, Mary Jane. Hashtag HeyJB. What charges is Trump facing today, Masa?
So he's facing 4 charges: conspiracy to violate rights, basically trying to take away the vote of people by trying to illegitimately hold on to power; conspiracy to defraud the U.S., obstruction of an official proceeding, the January 6th joint session where they were trying to certify the results, and Mr. Trump was pressuring of his vice president, Mike Pence, to not certify the election for Joe Biden, and a conspiracy to commit that obstruction of the official proceeding. But really serious, up to 50 years in prison if convicted. I mean, it's so far down the line from where we are right now.
You know, it's interesting. So we have this comment from Truth saying, wondering, Trump's daughter will run for president. You know, Ivanka's name has been brought up in the past. People have asked, it's always been an object of public fascination, especially obviously with conservatives, as to whether or not there would be another member of the Trump family that would ever run for office. But as of right now, folks, nobody.
They've taken a back seat. Haven't they taken a back seat?
We haven't seen much from Ivanka.
I think this was a little bit much for her. And I think she's taken, and as has the former president's wife. Just in the midst of all this, like running for office, being charged. I mean, we
haven't heard much or seen much of Melania.
Both those ladies.
We haven't seen or heard much from Ivanka and Jared.
Which doesn't mean that they don't support the president. It's just, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yes. As far as being in the public spotlight, we haven't seen very much from, but you know what? That could all be also as well the calm before the storm, because as Donald Trump holds rallies across the country in the very, very many months that we have ahead, about 14, 15 months ahead, you could be seeing Ivanka and Jared. You could be seeing Melania, Tiffany, of course, Donald Jr., many of them at those rallies. So they might be just...
Yeah, I think Don Jr. is not taking a step back, and neither is Kimberly Guilfoyle. But I have not seen much of Miss Ivanka or his wife either.
Let's see what happens in the months ahead. Masa, opportunity for you to talk about what your story entails for 6 o'clock tonight on WFLA News Channel, because you're working on that story right now. We got to let you get back to it.
Yeah, I can be with you until about 4:20, so I can be here for about 8 more minutes.
Okay.
But so tonight we're trying to just break down the new charges against the former president, and you're going to hear an attorney that thinks it's a very serious indictment, and you're going to hear someone that thinks that you have a prosecutor that is using a very novel theory to essentially target the former president. So we're going to break all of that down for you. And these are, you know, local attorneys. One of them represented one of the January 6th defendants, and another one is a former federal prosecutor who worked in the public integrity section at the Department of Justice, which Special Counsel Jack Smith also worked in that section. He was the chief of that section, but they were there at different times. But he's still someone that has a lot of experience in this realm.
You know, it's interesting. I want to point this out. NBC News is reporting they're still waiting for the magistrate judge to arrive, and they are now.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, they're reporting that.
On?
Look, this
Tell
is
me.
According to NBC News. They are
according to
reporting
New York
that
Times too.
Trump
Yeah.
appears to be getting impatient in the courtroom.
Let's see what NBC's saying.
That he's tapping his hands on the table and getting and appears visibly impatient for what it's worth, folks.
Because I mean, you could just imagine it's like a stressful thing. You want to get in, you want to get out, and now he's been there for more than 13 minutes. Yeah, it says the former president appeared. Let's see what the New York Times is saying. If he was annoyed. Yeah, he came in. He's been waiting 20 minutes now. He came in at 3:51. You were correct with that. He's staring. Oh, now the reports. Trump appeared to stare at Jack Smith.
Oh, interesting.
Yep.
So all
He's
the
leaning
little
forward.
nuances now, the even the slightest of nuances, everything from Trump taking his hands and clasping them together is now news for the next 20, or really the past 20 minutes or so as we wait for the magistrate judge to arrive. John wants to know, #KJB, is President Trump's Secret Service allowed in the courtroom today? And you can bet that security detail is permitted inside the courtroom. Exactly how close they are to the 45th president, that is unknown. But without question, a security detail is present in the room there with him or not too far away.
I agree.
And we have seen, and we know that because we have seen that with previous situations. I can't remember if it was Florida or New York, but we saw Secret Service or security detail go into the courtroom with him. I think that one was in New York.
And it's interesting that Evan Corcoran is in court right now because he was named in the indictment with the classified case. Much of that case was made based on, notes he had taken, and now he's still very close to the former president and appearing at his arraignment in D.C. in this different, unrelated matter. Yeah.
Wow. If the time is now 4:15 and the magistrate judge has not showed up yet.
Yeah.
Okay, look.
That's
again,
rare. I'm sorry. This is a big day.
Take off your reporter hat. Again, folks, Masa, former New York City prosecutor.
Yeah.
So take off your reporter hat for a second. Put on your attorney hat for me. You're the attorney in that room, and that leads you to what? Think what?
Well, I mean, typically judges, it just depends on the judge. Some judges are always on time. Some judges are late. But for this event, to where literally everyone's going to know you're late and you're not. I mean, what are you doing? So I'm not sure why he's not in the courtroom yet.
There's there's no other court case.
And then the chief judge is, also there waiting. So his boss is there waiting. Everyone's waiting.
You're
it's
making
extremely
a former
interesting.
president.
Yeah.
Wait.
I don't think he cares so much about that. I mean, it's not just that it's a former president, but it's everybody, right? All the networks are on this right now as I'm listening. That's what they're talking about, that here we are.
It's not a bathroom break,
16
right? I mean,
minutes
we're
in.
talking about it's got to be a pretty serious reason or
I
a
don't
legitimate
know.
legitimate reason, not serious reason, legitimate reason.
There's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason. Because, we know that with the last federal case in Miami about the documents, the magistrate judge there, very friendly, trying to lighten the mood. I believe, didn't that start on time? That started on time, as far as I recall. But it's just very interesting that you have Jack Smith, this really, powerful prosecutor. You have a former president. You have your chief judge, and you're still not there.
Really, I'm trying to remember any precedents for this, but I do remember everything being quite punctual with the Florida arraignment and New York as well. Okay, 4:16 p.m. Judge enters the courtroom.
Okay, that's fine. The gavel just banged. Trump stood with his lawyers when they said, "All rise." See, guys, we are giving you the play-by-play. We're on multiple websites. We're listening.
Wow.
To reports.
I wonder. Sometimes a judge will enter a courtroom and say, "Apologies for the tardiness. Here's the reason." Not that a judge ever really owes anybody an apology.
We'll see what they.
Courtroom,
15 minutes is not so bad. It's for 17 minutes. It's not
given the magnitude of the moment. It
could be, yeah. I mean, if it kept going on, that would have been is he okay? That something happened.
Yeah. This is very, very interesting.
So this could be wrapping up very, very, very soon. And it's interesting to just watch reporters try to describe when there's really nothing happening. The president looked at Jack Smith. He clasped his hands. He unclasped his hands.
Some people noting in the comment section, we'll just kind of put the comment away and we'll go full screen for a second.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of an ominous day in D.C. All of a sudden, this isn't what it looked like an hour ago. All of a sudden, the clouds move in and it's a little gloomy looking. So our comment section was saying, JB, look at the sky. Yeah, there might be rain in the forecast. There could be, an overcast. Could be an overcast afternoon. It could be rain or thunderstorms in the forecast. I haven't really looked. We're focused on Florida weather, not DC weather.
I saw how dark and cloudy it was, but I wasn't sure if it was just a photographer that didn't correctly white balance or open up the lens. So that's why I didn't mention anything. But I noticed how dark it was there as well.
Yeah, it's getting a little bit cloudy from what it appears like from several feeds that I've got. Oh, I have some other feeds coming in here as well. Let me switch some feeds around.
Yeah, see what you have.
Oh, check this out. here's a roof shot. Or no, I'm sorry. I believe that this is a live truck microwave transmitter camera. You see everybody in the distance, and this is how broadcast news operates. You see that one tall mast above the live truck. That is that's a mast for a live truck that is used to transmit a microwave signal usually. And sometimes you have cameras up there, and that gives you a top-down view. That's what you're currently looking. The camera that you're looking at right now, or looking from right now, is, I believe, on a mast. So that goes to show what it's like outside the courthouse with the high volume of media representation that we have. Masa, before I let you go, I told you I'd get you out of here on time so you can get to work on your 6 o'clock show.
So apparently the judge just gave a warning to everyone that no pictures are allowed to be taken, and any violation is going to result in sanctions, and not just in that main courtroom where we expect that there was no, phones in there, but in that overflow courtroom as well, that you could get in a lot of trouble if you, tried to take any picture there. But I will let you go, JB, and I'm going to try to figure out what's happening here.
Folks, catch Masa's live report
My pleasure
tonight
to be here with you today, JB.
WFLA News Channel 8. Masa, you're forgiven for being late.
I'm sorry. I know you were very annoyed with me.
Yeah, no,
you're the best.
No,
though.
I'm not annoyed.
You
just,
were when I first came, but you
can't leave your fellow streamer out to dry.
I left you out to dry. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. Masa, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Catch her tonight on WFLA News Channel 8. You'll see her, of course, on the 6 o'clock newscast tonight. And we'll continue to follow the reports that are coming out of the courtroom. And as soon as, folks, we have the proceeding end, we'll show you the shot of Trump's motorcade leaving the federal courthouse as he then gets ready to go on to his next destination. Joining me now on stream, WFLA's Capitol Bureau correspondent, joining us from Tallahassee, Florida. It's Libby Dean. Hello there, Libby, and good afternoon to you.
Hi, JB. Thanks for having me.
You're smiling. Talk to me about, is there something that you saw or something that you noted or something that caught your eye?
Always got to smile at the start of a stream.
You just
I just
happy
love
to
your
see me?
stream, JB, so
Okay.
happy to see you.
Okay, just happy to see me. I don't know if a joke popped up on your screen or something, but it's nice to see you as well, Libby. Thank you for joining us. Folks, Libby, the last several months really has been following the DeSantis campaign, of course, which is continues to be ongoing, even though, of course, according to the polls, Ron DeSantis is very much in second behind the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. So the political implications as far as the 2024 election year, that can't be ignored. Libby, what are you hearing in relation to this story in regards to how this most recent arraignment, this most recent indictment affects the 2024 race?
Yeah, every single one of these indictments goes hand in hand with the campaign trail and, how this 2024 election is going to play out, because we're seeing, history before our eyes. This is unprecedented. We have all of these 2024 candidates in uncharted waters here. How do they respond to the fact that the former president and now their opponent in the Republican primary is being indicted for a third time? I think the implications here, the political implications, once again, as I said, go hand in hand with each of these indictments. The first one, we saw him get a bump in fundraising as well as in the polls, and that just continues to play out. We continue to see him only rising in the polls and only gaining traction, having these almost 37-point lead over all of his opponents. So I think a lot of the 2024 opponents have been left kind of with how do they respond and how do they gain any spotlight when Trump continuously gets indicted. We saw Trump today say on Truth Social that he just needs a fourth indictment to be elected president again. And that just completely, I guess, lays out kind of the story that I've been working on today is no matter how many indictments or what the content of these indictments are, his supporters are likely going to stick with him. A lot of political experts that I speak with point out that.
The loyalty there is significant. We've noted it, especially here in the state of Florida. Trump has, of course, a tremendously loyal base. I want to point out the judge has read the charges against Trump. That is what's currently unfolding in the courtroom as we're being joined here by Libby Dean up in Tallahassee, Florida. To your point, Libby, and to the folks that you've been interviewing up there in the Florida State Capitol, look, the indictments against Donald Trump clearly not ideal from a legal standpoint. You don't want to be facing felony charges when you're, running for president of the United States. But at the same time, the name right now that is in the news cycle is Trump, and it's not DeSantis, it's not Scott, it's not any of the other candidates. It's really Trump dominating the news cycle on these days, specifically on the days that he is being, arraigned on these charges, whether it's in Florida or whether it's in New York or whether it's here in Washington, D.C. And so the news cycle, Trump obviously clearly knows the power of how to take a news story and use it to his advantage. Are there people that you have talked to that believe that this ultimately could work, as strange as it might sound, might actually work in the president's favor?
Yeah, that's actually a bite that's going to be used in my story at 5:30 today. When I spoke with a political expert, he said, as odd as this is, this will likely benefit his campaign. And as you had mentioned, the fact that, he's getting the spotlight in the news continuously over his 2024 opponents. I was actually thinking, literally in the shower this morning, I was thinking about this. I was like, kind of contrasting when I write my scripts, saying like, trying to compare word to word. And I thought about this, how Trump is really turning the courtroom into the campaign trail. They are going hand in hand for Trump, which is something we've never seen before. And Trump has always, he's, I guess, campaigned different than the traditional candidate, like we see, Asa Hutchinson or even DeSantis, how they go and campaign in these early primary states. Trump does that, but it's way different here. And now he has the spotlight of these court cases, one after the other. And we're even potentially seeing a fourth one before that August debate even comes up. So yeah, just again and again and again.
We have a breaking news update. Stand by.
Breaking news on WFLA Now. Here's JB Buno.
The 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, has formally entered a plea of not guilty on 4 felony charges related to seeking to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. We break down exactly what's going on inside the courtroom as we look here live outside of the courtroom complex in Washington, D.C. JB here with you live, folks, across all platforms, with WFLA Capitol correspondent Libby Dean joining us, who's been breaking down a little bit of how this falls into the equation of the 2024 race. But we have another indictment here, Libby, another arraignment, and another plea of not guilty from Donald Trump.
Yep. Trump again, a twice impeached, 3 times indicted former president. This is just each indictment. I say this, but it's unprecedented and historic. And this one, in a sense, is even more historic because of the charges. They're different than the charges he's facing in, South Florida versus the charges that he's facing in New York. These really have to do with democracy and the 2020 election. And that's what's different about this third one. But they're all historic, and this moment as well.
Trump was asked to state his full name in court. Can you imagine that moment inside the courtroom? Donald Trump speaking his name, saying Donald J. Trump, John, according to the report from NBC. He also said that he is 77 years old and he has not taken any medication in the past 24 hours that would make it difficult to participate in today's proceedings. So a lot of this... We've heard the charges get read. We have heard Donald Trump state his name for the record. And now we know that he has entered a plea of not guilty. Not entirely sure, Libby, I don't know if you've heard, and some of the folks that you've been speaking to, exactly how long this is expected to go. I remember the arraignment in Florida going far longer than anticipated. And also, too, folks who were on the live stream with us when Trump was indicted in relation to, again, the charges of hoarding classified documents at his complex, at his place in Mar-a-Lago, Trump made a pit stop after the arraignment. I don't know if you remember this, Libby, but he stopped at a prominent Cuban restaurant in South Florida and invited the cameras in, and it was an opportunity for him to go face to face with some of his Latino supporters in South Florida minutes after he was arraigned on charges pertaining to classified documents. As far as whether or not we're going to get any additional curveballs today, that remains to be seen, but this is all unfolding in court right now after the judge was about 15 minutes late.
Yeah, I do remember Trump, when he took that campaign stop after the indictment in Miami, but it's
and we're losing
a lot different,
we're losing your audio there a little bit, Libby. If you could state that again, because I don't know if it's your AirPods or the Zoom call, but try that again.
Okay, yeah, JB, I can try again. So basically, I was just saying about that campaign stop that the former president made after his arraignment in Miami would be a little different than this one if he made one in DC, because he doesn't have that voter base in DC like he has in Miami. And I don't know where he would. I used to live in DC, but there's a few restaurants around there. I used to run right by this courthouse, and there's a few. I think there's like Le Bon and like a few options, but nothing as fun as I think his last time.
Yeah, that was the curveball that was the stop at the Cuban restaurant. There was clearly a lot of people happy there, greeting Donald Trump as he arrived at that restaurant in D.C. The welcome mat might look a little bit different depending, of course, on where you go and what has been. But we haven't heard any information on whether or not Trump plans to make any unexpected stops. Obviously, if they're unexpected, we're not going to be given a tip about it like we didn't have the tip last time. But we are just getting another update from the courtroom. Trump is being, and this is all expected, folks, Trump is being released on the condition that he not communicate with witnesses in the case except through or in the presence of counsel. According to, let's see here, the defendant shall not communicate about the facts of the case with any individual known to be a witness except through counsel or in the presence of counsel, is the exact quote. The judge is now informing Trump that if he violates the conditions of his release, an arrest warrant can be issued for him and he could be detained. This warning also a routine part of any arraignment where the defendant is not detained. So yeah, all of this is very standard so far, folks. And also too, this seems to be moving along at a quicker pace than the indictment that we had months back here in the state of Florida. So whether or not we're getting closer to this wrapping up, we'll pay close attention, but you'll see. You want to know when it's going to wrap up? I'll tell you when it's going to wrap up. When you see a lot of reporters and photojournalists all scurry into position here on the center of your screen, because they will get information that it's over, and then all of a sudden you will see a lot of people start to move, and then we'll know that activity is picking up inside the courthouse and also outside of the courthouse as the motorcade gets ready to take Trump to his next destination. Libby, we're not out there today. I've covered politics before. I don't think I've been.
Your favorite topic.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. This is a unique situation with all of the different competing media agencies that are there, all the different companies that are there with their tents. They're all just trying to get a camera in position to capture a glimpse of Trump as he exits here momentarily.
Yeah, I remember when the reporters were leaving the courthouse in Miami, it was, chaos, everyone sprinting, and the pictures that came out of that, reporters running with their notebooks, which is just funny to me now, in the 21st century that we can't, it's so weird not having your phone, just sitting there tweeting. Like I've covered these kind of stories in federal courthouses where you can't have your phone with you. And it's so interesting. I actually have my notebook right here that I use when I go to courthouses, and it's just like almost time traveling like back.
It is. And again, being joined here by Libby Dean, folks. The chaos that we saw after the arraignment in Florida, a lot of that was related to all of the supporters that had gathered for Trump outside of the courthouse. There were people lined up for more than there was a stretch of road. I don't want to say if it was more than a mile because I don't want to misreport, but there was a long stretch of road there in South Florida that was just lined with just Trump flags and Trump supporters and Trump signs. It seemed like a very long line and a lot of supporters. Very different tenor here today. So we'll see how this all unfolds, but look for activity here in the center of your screen, folks, as to when Trump is going to be leaving the courthouse. Just in moments ago, the first hearing in the Trump case set for August 28th at 10 a.m. later this month.
What's super interesting about that, JB, is that first Republican presidential candidates, they'll have that debate later this month. It's August 23rd. So that'll be before this first hearing that you just mentioned, which I think is really interesting because Trump hasn't even committed to participating in that debate. And he actually has until 48 hours prior to it to decide if he even wants to participate. But it's not likely that he'll do that because, we rarely see these front runner candidates like Trump who have 37-point leads. We rarely see that candidate participate in the debate because it can really only hurt them more than help them, and it can only help those candidates who are behind them or trailing him rather than hurt them. So we'll see, but that's interesting because that's what, just a few days apart.
I also find it interesting, Libby, and I appreciate you making that note just about the campaign trail, but also as well, the other two indictments, hearings were not scheduled on the day of the arraignment. So this gives us now a date for a pretrial hearing, and exactly what is on the docket, so to speak, for that pretrial hearing and what the purpose of that hearing specifically is. That maybe we'll get some clarity here in a moment, but it is worth noting and worth reporting, obviously, that the very first hearing in the Trump case will be August 28th. And I believe, that to me is extremely noteworthy that we're getting that very first court date right now today.
It just shows that this judge is committed to moving quickly on this case, like she has said previously. And she's known for kind of being this way, quickly moving through cases, but this one especially of importance with the 2024 election. But I mean, these indictments, there's one after the other, and they're somehow going to factor into Trump's campaign trail and just Trump's candidacy overall.
Very interesting. Also worth noting here as well, there were 3 dates presented by the judge. As far as the first hearing, August 21st, 22nd, and then the 28th. Prosecutors wanted the 21st, the earliest most date. The defense wanted the 28th, and so the Trump team got their wish with the date being August 28th at 10 a.m. But my goodness, we're so used to, and I know our stream audience is going to be thinking the same way. We're so used to hearings being scheduled months in advance. This is weeks in advance. So the day of the week, I don't know what day of the week it is. The 28th is a Monday. So really, the final Monday of August, but within a calendar month, we have the next hearing in this case. Exactly what is going to happen on that date remains to be seen, but yeah, big deal, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, that debate is right before, but this is quicker than a lot of the other indictments are moving. I don't have exact dates for you, but even the fact that he was arraigned, so quickly after this news came down, earlier this week. I believe it was that Monday night or Tuesday night? I can't keep track. But yeah, I think it's definitely moving quickly. And it's good to see that we have a date, because I think getting these kinds of indictments, getting things figured out here is really important ahead of 2024. Whether it's one indictment or all three that are, come to a conclusion before, which is probably not likely, it is really important.
We're waiting on updates, but, now that we have the next hearing being scheduled, that usually, folks, signals that we're getting closer to the end of the arraignment. And so we now I have another feed. I'm going to start hitting the touchscreen here and start bouncing around to different feeds. But this is a photographer who has his camera or her camera on their shoulder, moving into position as we are looking here at just how gloomy the sky is today. They're not shooting anything, but this is movement because now reporters, photojournalists, really all the press that is there, they are getting ready for Trump departing the courthouse and being led out of Washington, D.C. Once again. So we'll stay here with this feed. We're going to bounce to this feed as well. We got cameras all over the place. You should see my grid right now, Libby. It's just one shot after another of different cameras located around the U.S. Capitol, just pointing basically to the same courthouse. Everyone waiting for...
This used to be my... where I would go run. This was like my favorite place to run. The mall is like right there. So I'm jealous of these people, even though it does look very gloomy.
Yeah, it's a gloomy day on the Hill, so to speak. And there you can see the Capitol building in the top right-hand corner of your screen, and a busy day with all of the various reporters that have parked their live truck vehicles and sat truck vehicles right outside of the courthouse.
This is similar to every other indictment where there's been a huge media presence. In Miami, we saw there were a lot of protesters and then obviously supporters when we did the live stream on that arraignment. But this one, I think, is similar to the others in the sense that there's a lot of media. But the difference here is the fact that it's in D.C. versus Miami. Miami, Trump won, and he has so much support down there in Southern Florida, whereas in DC, I think he only has like 10% support from any voters there. And it's this actually reminds me of something Governor DeSantis said yesterday, who's running, against former President Trump. He said, if a ham sandwich was a Republican, a ham sandwich could be indicted in DC. So I think that's a lot of, pundits have pointed and political experts have pointed to. And a lot of people have questioned, can you get a fair trial in D.C.? But the thing is, you could also compare that to him having a trial in Miami, which is more of a Republican-leaning place, or Southern Florida, which is just more Republican-leaning. And then he also has the one in New York. So kind of juxtaposes like each one of these counties who really back Trump versus who don't, but also we see the Obama-appointed judge in this case versus the Trump-appointed judge in the case down in Miami.
Libby, I remember you and I being in the Stream Center together on election night, and we were talking about Ron DeSantis. We were talking with our political experts about how it felt as if it was a certainty at the time that he was going to run for president. But there was always this tension when you brought up the notion of DeSantis running for president, because he would be doing so against Donald Trump, who supported DeSantis's rise to the governor's mansion in Tallahassee. And so just this very bizarre situation with Trump and DeSantis formerly very much seeing eye to eye and being on the same page. And now they're very much against one another, pitted against one another on the campaign trail. What has that been like to cover? The transformation, the flip of the script. It's a 180 from where we were a year ago with Trump and DeSantis very much allies, and now they're they're sparring very publicly, and people are wondering as well, are they ever going to be on a debate stage together? It's going to be, I would imagine, quite awkward, just as it would be awkward for Trump and Pence to be on a debate stage together. But you, covering DeSantis as much as you have, what has that been like to see the script literally take a 180-degree turn?
Yeah, I think you were going to sum it up perfectly, which is it going from allies to enemies, which is what has happened here between DeSantis and Trump. You know, the whole relationship started from Trump endorsing the governor and that boosting him in the polls to then beat his Democratic opponent. And it was close. I want to say it was like only a few percentage points between him losing that first election for governor. This one, obviously, way different. And as you said, that I was covering that in the stream center with you that night of the elections. And it was clear that, you know, DeSantis was going to make a bid for the White House. I remember when actually those chants broke out at his election night, his party, after he announced, you know, that he beat Charlie Crist by like 20 points or something. I want to say it was around that. But I remember they chanted in the crowd, you know, 2 more years. And that was just another clarification of the fact that he would likely run for president. And he held off on announcing that bid until, I believe that was in May that he announced that bid for the White House on Twitter. And, you know, the two candidates here, we first saw, you know, DeSantis come out of the gate. It was kind of a rocky start with that Twitter launch, as like, you know, there were the technical issues, and then he got off onto the campaign trail, and he's had, you know, just a few snafus with like the way that he's interacted with voters, and it hasn't necessarily, his message of, you know, his Florida blueprint hasn't necessarily translated to the entire, you know, electorate. It's not something that he can cast broadly on several states. And that's what a lot of political experts that I speak with talk about. But the difference between these two, obviously, they were a lot closer in the polls if you would have, you know, looked a couple months back. I would say that a lot of their policies are very similar, but they're very different in the personality sense. I would say that a lot, if you look back at the beginning, before when he was announcing that he was going to make a bid for the White House, Trump, you know, pretty much called him a traitor, and has continued kind of that message. But DeSantis hasn't taken any shots directly at the former president. You know, today he actually had a virtual press conference where he was talking about, he was asked about, you know, this arraignment and what it means for his campaign. And he didn't take shots at the former president. Instead, he took shots at the current president, President Biden. And he took shots at, you know, a weaponized justice system rather than some of the other candidates like Chris Christie or Asa Hutchinson. Those candidates, you know, taking shots directly at, and VP Mike Pence, you know, Trump, his former boss, he even has come out, those candidates have come out against the former president, where DeSantis has kind of, you know, walked a thin line on that and not really wanted to alienate that voter base, that MAGA voter base, because he sees it as a crucial voter base when it comes to the primary election for president.
It's been fascinating to watch it all unfold, and it might get even more fascinating should they walk onto the same debate stage in the months ahead. Also hearing as well, seeing reports that DeSantis is going to debate Gavin Newsom, California governor,
yes,
as well. Talk about a moment to grab your popcorn, folks, as far as two competing ideologies being on a very prominent national stage. Let's pass along the latest information from the courthouse. The arraignment is over, according to multiple media reports, and that Trump is in the process and likely by now has left the courthouse, or he's about to be leaving the courthouse. His motorcade will be taking him out of downtown, of course, out of Washington, D.C., outside of off of Capitol Hill. And so we'll be monitoring that. The reason that this camera is pointed so intently at this particular intersection is because at any moment we are going to see the motorcade take Donald Trump back to the airport, as we understand it.
Is that it?
In fact,
or
let's
am I
go.
just seeing
Let's
a lot
go.
of black Suburbans?
Yep. All of a sudden, we're seeing a lot of activity.
Yeah.
So this is now believed to be the motorcade for the 45th president of the United States. Black SUV after black SUV carrying Donald Trump and his team following the arraignment in court today. 4 felony counts. Trump pleading not guilty. And now, hey, check this out, Libby. We're in the press vehicle.
Oh.
So if you want to know what it's like to be in a motorcade with a former president, yeah, you're getting an idea. This is a live feed
I used
from
to
inside
run
the
it
motorcade.
under that tunnel. That used
Right.
to be my running trail. It was right there. So I'm not in the van, but have been there.
My wife and I were in DC just last year, and I remember walking in this area. So
I
yeah,
love how
this
you
is-
can pull up all these feeds, JB. This is so interesting.
Yeah, it's not too often that you get a look inside of a motorcade for a former president. So here we're in the tunnel. I can't believe the signal is getting out of the tunnel.
Yeah.
I mean, just
they
from-
must have equipped several MiFis in that van.
You know what, though? A lot of tunnels now have cellular antennas, placed within them so that you don't lose cell signal when you are inside a tunnel. It's not even just for drivers. It's also for emergency personnel, so that if it's related to an emergency, a 911 call, you're able to still, you don't drop that call, whether it's Verizon or AT&T or one of the other cellular providers. But now we're back out of the tunnel, and you're part of the Trump motorcade here, folks. But the arraignment is over. The president has pled not guilty to 4 felony charges. And now that we are at this stage in the live stream, if you have any questions for Libby, if you have any questions for myself, or if you just want your voice to be heard, you can use #HeyJB or #HeyLibby in our Facebook Live or YouTube Live comment section. Either of those comment sections, we'll be able to take those comments. If they use the hashtag, we'll be able to put them on screen and have an interactive conversation with you as well. And I want to spotlight one of our great moderators on the WFLA YouTube page as well. Team Brittany. Oh, no, I can't. Well, Team Brittany is basically saying in our comment section, please keep the chat clean and respectful. Thank you for all being here. Use a hashtag to ask questions. Hopefully, we've been told that now a helicopter will be following there is the comment. Please don't post misinformation. And what we'll do is monitor here now in the stream center for that helicopter feed. Don't have that helicopter feed at the moment. We might be going back to the motorcade feed to show
So
everybody.
many screens, JB. So many screens.
You've been here with me, Libby.
I know.
multiple
I'm
times.
just jealous. I have my little computer in front of me, and you've got like literally the situation room going.
Basically, yeah. That's one of the comments I get most of all on our live streams is, my goodness, JB, why do you have so many screens? Well,
It's necessary.
It is. This one to talk to our team out in the newsroom. This one to monitor all of your comments. This one to actually punch up. These are actually all the feeds are. I see all the feeds on this screen. This is to change any graphics. And then Libby, you're on this screen over here. This is how we bring in guests. So a little behind the scenes of how we do things here in the stream center.
Don't mind me just like going through a million tabs. You can have each tab open on a different, monitor.
That is exactly right. Just endless tabs across all of these various screens. Welcome in, folks. Let's see here. Billy says, #HeyLibby, should the sitting president comment on these proceedings? And so it's not up to us now that we have the motorcade feedback up. It's not up to us to determine whether a president should comment. But Libby, on that note, have you seen any statement released by the White House, by Joe Biden's team?
Okay, I'm laughing only because the video that was released today, I believe it was from CNN. It was CNN exclusive video of Biden, and he's on vacation right now. So there hasn't been really many statements from the White House, but the one that when he was asked about it today, he was riding his bike, and this reporter, goes, do you have any thoughts on the Trump arraignment today? And as he passes by, he goes, no. And it just like fades out because he doesn't have a mic on him and there's no one really following him on the bike. It was awesome. Just a very like humanly moment from the president. But that's really the only
it was a drive by or a bike by no to the media.
And then all the Secret Service behind him, like, bye. It was interesting. But yeah, not a lot of comments from them. I think it's interesting, actually, this point is the fact that Democrats haven't necessarily capitalized on these. I think they're letting it play out. They're letting kind of what happened in 2020 happen again, which is kind of Trump sometimes digging himself, political experts say he'll dig himself into a hole.
As we see the motorcade now, the motorcade coming towards us, folks, here on your screen. I'm sorry, Libby, continue.
No, you're good. You're good. This is important. It's not in the ban, but we're getting a live look.
Mm-hmm.
That DC traffic, though.
You're seeing it on one side, and also
I guess they're headed into DC, where the motorcade's headed towards Virginia. I don't know.
To the airport, as we understand it.
Okay.
Here you can see a lot of windshield wipers on it. It appears to be a misty day in DC. We were talking earlier about the clouds overhead looked pretty ominous. So there's the motorcade with the escort clearing the way as well for other drivers on the road. Brian, in our comment section on Facebook Live, wants to know what our YouTube Live poll results are. We asked earlier, and we've let this this poll just kind of just linger in our comment section so that people could continue to vote on it. And we've received 1,744 votes, 45 votes now still coming in. And we asked this question: do you think the felony charges against Trump ahead of the 2024 election are politically motivated? Because so many people in our comment section will say this is a witch hunt. This is just to get Trump before it's 2024. This is all being orchestrated by one side. This is all happening at a certain time in the election calendar for a very particular reason. There are people that really do genuinely feel that there are political motivations at play, and that some people believe that those are the only motivations at play. So we asked the question on YouTube Live, do you think that the felony charges are politically motivated? And we have a near 50-50 result. 46,
that's so interesting.
46% of our poll respondents, again, unscientific social media poll. These results cannot be definitively relied upon because this poll question wasn't conducted scientifically, but it does give us an idea as to how our audience is feeling out there. 46% say yes, they think that these charges are politically motivated, while 54% say no, they are not politically motivated. So more saying no, but it's pretty close to, it's way more close than some of the other political polls that we have run on stream in the past.
Politically motivated aside, I mean, he is a former president, and that is going to make things political. He's running for president again. These indictments go hand in hand with the politics of him being being a candidate for president again. So then, Libby, is the question really, if Trump wasn't running for president again, would he still be facing charges? Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting question that a lot of political experts would say yes, that he would still be facing these, but they would still have a lot of political implications because he's a former president, and that politics will always be in play when it comes to the former president now, because he did these things while he was in office, and then now he's trying to get back in office while facing, the indictments and arraignments and these kinds of things, these charges of the time he spent while he was in office, the things that happened over his 4 years. So I think saying it's politically motivated isn't something that I would personally make a comment on, but I do think that him being a former president and the fact that he's running again makes this inherently political.
Excuse me. Water down the wrong tube. Excuse me. Welcome to live streaming, folks. I was just about
I know.
to say.
I was about to grab my Stanley with my water.
I was just about to say, Trump is expected to make remarks at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. And this is something that is kind of new. So Trump is expected to any moment now get out of his vehicle, and the press via this camera feed, they're going to have access to these remarks. So his first comments since his arraignment on these felony charges. Give me a moment, folks. We're going to get this ready for a new audience, and we're also going to redistribute this on our various platforms. Libby, I'm going to let you have the mic for just 60 seconds here.
I actually have something to say. So I was just thinking about one thing that we haven't brought up if we have new people who have joined the stream, is that hearing is set for August 28th, the next hearing in this August 28th. And one thing that I focus on up here, as he's, traveled the campaign trail, and also just his upcoming, being an upcoming rising GOP star kind of thing, and then his relationship with the former president as well, and how things have kind of unraveled there. Because he's, running against him for that GOP nomination. Go ahead, JB, interrupt me.
No, we lost you there for a little bit just because I think it's Wi-Fi signal there, Libby. But if you want to just reiterate that point. I think we've lost your audio now completely there, Libby. Let's
okay.
Yeah.
Is it cutting out now?
It is cutting out a little bit. Why don't you try to rejoin the call, and we'll bring it back on here in just a second. Okay. You're seeing it is a stormy day here, folks, at the airport in Washington, D.C., Ronald Reagan International Airport, as we're getting ready for Trump speaking here live from the airport. We're about to redistribute this live on all platforms. Stand by. So now we have reporters that are running over for this interview that is going to be taking place, this press availability.
This is almost reminiscent of the scene in Miami, them running out of the courthouse. Now they're running towards this plane.
They are recalibrating the feed now, folks, to get a steady signal from the airport. Stand by. I have a backup feed as well from another press crew. So,
of course you do.
I have backup feeds. Yep.
Backup for the backup.
Backup for the backups. All right, folks, stand by. This is about to begin any moment. And there is the 45th president of the United States pleading not guilty to 4 felony charges.
Well, thank you very much. This is a very sad day for America. And it was also very sad driving through Washington, D.C. and seeing the filth and the decay and all of the broken buildings and walls and the graffiti. This is not the place that I left. It's a very sad thing to see it. When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America. Thank you very much, everyone.
Do you want these trials to happen before the 2024 election?
Not taking questions from reporters. The 45th president of the United States, under his Trump umbrella, now boarding his Trump plane as he departs Washington, D.C., a city that he says looks quite different from when he left it years ago after the results of the 2020 presidential election. JB here with the live folks on WFLA Now, alongside our Capitol Bureau correspondent joining us from Tallahassee, Florida, Libby Dean, who's been providing us with some analysis and expertise on her coverage of not just the Trump campaign, but also the DeSantis campaign, as we now see members of the Trump team board their plane, the Trump plane, as they get ready to leave D.C. For their next destination. Any notes there, Libby, as far as us hearing from Trump for the first time since those felony charges were heard in court, and since he decided, of course, to plead not guilty as expected?
Yeah, I would say those comments that were made were, the expected comments, saying that this is, a sad day for America. I think it's interesting that he pointed out that DC has changed a lot since he was in office. But the one thing as a political reporter that I heard is that him bringing up, he's beating Biden by a lot. I would say a lot of the polls actually have them quite like neck and neck. But he also brought up that he's like the leader in the GOP primary, which is, in fact, he has he's crushing his opponents in the GOP primary. But he said, about Biden that he said, if you can't beat them, you prosecute them, or you persecute them, or you prosecute them, which I thought was an interesting thing, because I mean, a lot of Republicans continue to point to these, all three indictments as a politicized, the weaponization of our justice system. And so for him to make those comments, as expected, it's just interesting the way he phrased it. If you can't beat them, if you can't persecute them, you prosecute them. So, yeah.
And we'll see exactly how this all unfolds. If you're just joining us, folks, Donald Trump pled not guilty. That, of course, obviously expected. What we weren't sure we were going to get was where this goes from here, but we do have that thanks to the judge setting a pretrial hearing for August 28th. That was the date that the Trump defense attorneys requested as far as the next hearing. The other arraignments, the one in Florida, the one in New York, we didn't get a next calendar date. So that created, of course, uncertainty at the time as to when things would pick back up and how it would, impact Trump's ability to campaign. But here we have the next hearing set for August 28th. And if you're just joining us, Libby, that is noteworthy because there are some key dates around August 28th as well.
Yeah, as we've mentioned, that first hearing, pretrial hearing being set for August 28th, I believe we said that's a Monday. And then, so that Wednesday before August 23rd is actually the Republican debate, the presidential debate. So I think it's interesting that is prior to, just another instance where Trump will be in the spotlight. But the key thing here is that Trump hasn't even said that he's going to participate in that debate. And he has up to 48 hours before the debate to decide if he would like to participate. It's not likely that he will, because we rarely see, front runners who are so far ahead like Trump participate in these debates, because it usually can hurt them more than help them, if they said the wrong thing. But it can help his opponents more than hurt them, because they have a chance to, be side by side on the stage with Trump and say that they, took him on. But it's shaping up to be that he will not participate in that debate. But, we've seen him in past debates. We've seen him in a lot of debates. And the way that he debates is, very different than a lot of politicians debate. And I think it would be so interesting to see him side by side on a stage with DeSantis, because I remember covering with you, JB, that debate between Charlie Crist and DeSantis, and the way that DeSantis, debated in that was not necessarily his strongest performance. And it would be really interesting to see him side by side on a debate stage with the former president, as they used to be allies, now enemies, and the relationship continues to unravel and is not expected to be mended. I mean, unless, I guess, DeSantis were to back out, which is not likely.
Trump is considered to be, by many, to be a relatively strong debate performer, perhaps because he doesn't really play by the rules that you would expect for another elected official. Name calling is on the table, and also, too, he isn't shy on the debate stage. Not saying that any politicians in particular are, but he's just very boisterous up there, to say the least. Meanwhile, you're right. We did cover the DeSantis and Crist debate together. And look, I talked to analysts on both sides of the aisle who agreed that DeSantis's performance on the debate stage that night were mixed, and that some people really felt like he was able to get through to voters, and others who felt like there were many just very awkward moments and awkward just exchanges that just didn't land, so to speak. And so while Trump, of course, is considered by many to be a debate performer that does resonate with voters, what a DeSantis versus Trump debate would look like would be interesting. But to your point, Libby, analysts and pundits continue to say, what does Trump stand to gain at this stage in the election cycle with going on to the debate stage with somebody like DeSantis? He's winning dominantly right now in the polls.
One thing that I think is so interesting when I spoke with political experts about this is, no matter if Trump participates or not, he is going to be the topic of conversation. These indictments are going to be brought up. There's no way around it. And that is what is interesting to me, is the fact that whether Trump is on stage or not, he will be present in that debate, and he will be the center of it. Just like every time I end up covering these stories, about who's going to be the Republican nominee for 2024, the spotlight comes back to Trump because of these indictments they keep hitting. And it brings him back in the spotlight, and these other 2024 candidates, are kind of grasping at straws when it comes to, the only option they have is to react to these indictments. That's the way that they get the attention. And we actually saw that leaked campaign memo from the DeSantis campaign that said, earned media is the cake, and that's the way to really gain voters' attention. And without that, you're kind of sunk. And the Trump campaign knows exactly how to capitalize on that, and has been using these indictments to fundraise, and has gotten a lot of money and from voters and just donors in general when it comes to paying for his legal fees that continue to add up as the indictments continue to add up. So I think that that's really interesting, is that he'll 100%, whether he's on the stage or not, he will be present at that debate. It will be brought up. These indictments will not be, skirted. And we'll have to see how the candidates react. And from past, things that they've said, we have Pence, who has spoken out against the former president. And then we have DeSantis, who is blaming a weaponized justice system. And then we have Chris Christie, on the side of Mike Pence. It kind of leaves the 2024 field split, that any Trump related thing, it could be an indictment, it could be anything that he's involved in, usually splits the field, because we see a lot of these 2024 candidates not want to step on that voter base, that MAGA voter base, because they think that it is essential to win the primary that they have to have the support of that MAGA base. And they would step on the toes of that MAGA base by stepping on the toes of Trump. And that's why I feel like DeSantis is so reserved when it comes to commenting on these indictments.
It's something that we'll continue to monitor as far as how exactly these indictments impact both Trump's ability to campaign and just his popularity overall. Libby noted earlier about how there is this tremendous, overwhelming loyalty that comes from the Trump base that you do not see with other political candidates. And so it'll be very interesting to see how the poll numbers develop, how they evolve, and whether or not the needle will move a whole lot as it becomes more as we get closer to who the Republican nominee will be and who the expected Democratic nominee is expected to be. That's, of course, Joe Biden. How the poll numbers reflect the poll numbers. What I'm trying to say is the poll numbers are way more interesting now that we have all of these indictments piling up, and how it impacts Trump's popularity going forward is just really something worth monitoring. The pollsters are really going to be getting a lot of attention because of these most recent legal scenarios that have been unfolding for Trump. And I, for one, will be very curious to see whether it's in the days ahead or really over the course of the next week or so, what those first set of polls look like following this indictment. But to tell you the truth, they didn't waver much after the arraignment in New York. They didn't waver too much after the arraignment in Florida. And we'd be crazy, we'd be foolish to think that they're going to waver after this particular arraignment. So, but we'll monitor it, Libby, you and I both.
Yeah, I think a lot of people say, they always say, polls are a snapshot in time, and we're still really far away from 2024. But I mean, it is inching up, and we're having that debate, around the corner as well. But I think one thing that I've said earlier on in the stream is that Trump has capitalized on these indictments. Him saying today on Truth Social, I just need a fourth one and I'll be elected again. I think that is the key premise of how he has capitalized and said, I am here for the voters, and this is me taking, the hit here, but I'm really taking the hit for Americans overall. And that is something that he has taken to Truth Social to repeat. So I would agree in the sense that the way that this has played out for his campaign, in the sense that he has been able to get a boost in the polls and a boost in fundraising. And when I speak with political experts, that's what they continuously say, is that you would think that this would hurt him, but that's not the case. And I don't see that this third one turns out much different.
Regardless of how you feel about Biden, regardless of how you feel about Trump, if the polls and if this trajectory that we are on, if everything holds and we are looking at a rematch, if you will, in 2024 between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, here's a fact that Americans will, they all know this, but it's a fact worth stating. Donald Trump will be 78 years old next year. Joe Biden will be 81 years old next year. Two of the oldest candidates we've ever had, two of the oldest, presidents that we've really ever had. And that, of course, is something that I continue to see in our comment section. People noting the age of Joe Biden and people noting the age as well of Donald Trump. Also, Trump stating his age in court today, saying that he is 77 years old. He'll be 78 next year. Also something.
Yeah, and if you juxtapose that with his opponents, who, Ron DeSantis is, I believe, 44. So, almost, half the age of Biden. And I think that's one thing that is brought up a lot about Biden, but him and Trump aren't that far apart in age. And I do think it's interesting today at that arraignment that he, had to say that out loud. I don't know if that's standard of procedure. I've never been arraigned, but
yeah, no, I would hope, Libby, that you haven't been arraigned. That would be breaking news on the stream of a different type.
Could you imagine? I'm like, so in my own experience, actually, I had to state my age.
Yeah, so is Libby Dean an alias? Or are we talking to the real Libby Dean? So many questions. No, grateful that Libby, and also I can say for myself as well, neither of us have ever been indicted or arraigned. So, but Donald Trump has been now arraigned multiple times on multiple different charges. Again, the one in New York, the legal, one more time before we begin to wrap up our live stream here, folks. In New York, the charges there are mostly related to, of course, the alleged hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. The case in the state of Florida is pertaining to the classified documents that investigators found in Mar-a-Lago that were not supposed to be removed from the White House, that were supposed to be kept up in Washington, D.C., but were found with Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago, according to investigators. And then, of course, this one is pertaining to the allegations that Trump broke the law in seeking to overturn the 2020 presidential election. One last time, Libby Dean, folks, our Capitol correspondent, joining us from Tallahassee, Florida. Libby, great to have you on stream. What are you working on? What do you got coming up tonight on WFLA News Channel 8?
Yep. So actually, in about 9 minutes, that story is going to air that has to do with how Trump's opponents are reacting to this latest indictment, and the fact that Trump is turning the courtroom into his own version of the campaign trail. So, yep, that'll be up in a few minutes.
Certainly have quite a bit of political theater over the next year plus as we get closer to November 2024. Lucky to have Libby with us, reporting on all things Florida politics up in Tallahassee. We appreciate her. We also appreciate WFLA investigator Masa Saidi, the two ladies splitting time with us on stream. Masa on the first half, Libby on the back end. We appreciate both of them bringing their expertise and their reporting to our live stream. Please give them both a follow on social media. How do you follow Libby Dean on social media?
Most of my handles are just Libby Dean, and it's spelled with an EY. Just gonna put that out there, and then my Twitter is WFLA Libby. But I was gonna say, JB, we have to also give you, some props here, because you're the one who makes all of it happen. I just sit here and blab.
I have too many followers, so you don't have to follow me. I'm not even gonna give you my handle, because it's scrolling on the bottom of the screen, which is kind of
there you go.
Defeats the purpose of me downplaying it and saying everybody should be following Libby and not myself. Look, if you want politics, you're following the individual on the right side of your screen. Other stories, of course, I'll be monitoring here in the Stream Center on the left side of your screen. Libby, we appreciate your time, and we'll see you on the campaign trail as the candidates continue to spar, and all the political headlines that come out of that.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, JB.
All right, folks, we're going to leave up the live stream here for you as the Trump plane gets ready to depart the airport in Washington, D.C. This has been our interactive coverage on WFLA Now. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time here from the Stream Center in Tampa, Florida.